find what you like and what you can be potentially good at, and the kind of like Venn diagram cross section of those, hit that, and then make those connections with the service professionals in that industry that are going to be able to feed you business, because that's where you're going to get all your business from to start out with, right?
All right, Podfather, we're here again together.
Yes, we are.
We're going to talk about mastering real estate niches.
Okay.
And I know you have something to contribute to this because you used to be a realtor.
I did. Yeah, I was a realtor for about 6 years, 2013 to 2019.
Do you remember in your early days, and I know every agent asks me this when they start in the business, is that you end up trying to work with all types of clients.
Yes.
And in all types of areas.
Yes.
And do you remember holding open houses? Where did you live? Did you always live in East Vancouver?
Actually, I lived in Kitts when I first started, and then shortly after that, actually for half my career, I lived in Kitts.
Okay.
Yeah.
And during your career, do you remember having to drive over the bridge or to the Fraser Valley, and you're just like making appointments here and there, and you were like really all over the city?
Yeah, definitely. All over the place. I remember driving to Poco to look at sub $100,000 condos like, with a guy from the States who was hitting on me the entire time. Like, it was so awkward. But I would do anything, literally anything.
Right? So you're working in every neighborhood you don't even know, you barely know anything about.
Yeah.
So you're just trying to represent also every property under the sun. And what does that get anyone? If you're trying to understand every single neighborhood, where does that get you?
Nowhere. Like, a lot of lost deals, a lot of I eventually at some point realized that I came from working in construction, and like my mom is a developer, and like eventually at some point realized like I don't really know a lot about condos. What am I doing constantly trying to sell condos? Because every realtor thinks when they start out, okay, I'll start out with condos and then I'll work my way into townhomes and more expensive stuff and then go to luxury. But like, work with what you know is probably makes more sense, right?
Yeah.
And so when I started working with houses and duplexes, I was like, oh, I can speak to every single thing here because it's what I've worked with, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's how I started as well. So at the very beginning, I worked for a really big developer, and I was selling multifamily homes. So I really understood the construction of wood frame construction, townhouses, and high rises.
Yeah.
But I really understood the process from working with the development side of things, the architect, the interior design, and then how it was marketed to the public.
Yeah.
And that takes a few years of getting from ground zero to actually producing a marketing brochure.
Yes.
Now, I ended up specializing in pre-sale projects naturally, without even really thinking about it. I just felt like, well, I might as well help developers to market their projects. And that over time, my consistent efforts of building my portfolio, it built a lot of trust, a lot of credibility. And quite frankly, I actually saved a lot of money of not trying to advertise in every neighborhood I didn't really understand.
Yeah.
So this particular podcast is really focusing on how you're going to niche down. And that way, every time you get a call, and if it's out of your specialty, like a commercial lease, you're going to hand it off because maybe you just don't have time to service those type of clients. Well, if you ever felt like this job is too much and it's going too fast, you're not alone. Because in every person's early days of being a realtor, you want to take every single client that walks through the door. You want to work in every single neighborhood. And I think when this is what we call the grind and this is what we call the hustle.
Yep.
Okay?
You're just trying to survive, right?
Absolutely. You're just trying to do everything. But what you really need to do is to streamline the type of clients you want to work with.
Yeah.
How do we figure out what your niche is? So, very popular, common question that I get is, well, do I just start working and then I find out what my niche is?
That seems to make some sense on the surface, but
But there's another question is, do you work with like doing a self-assessment and figuring out this is what I like and this is what I want to work with or who I want to work with?
I would think that would make more sense to me.
Right.
Like do a little kind of like inner soul searching, because you're going to find something that you actually think is interesting,
Mhm.
and maybe there's something that you know a bit about, and maybe those two things have a bit of overlap, and that's where
Mhm.
you want to be working, right? Is that kind of how you do it?
I feel like, okay, for me, obviously, I started working in projects as an employee.
Yeah.
And then as I got into the resale field, I took what I learned,
Yeah.
which was a very good process, very good system.
Yeah.
And then I basically replicated it and made it my own. That worked for me based on, obviously, I was a one woman show.
Yeah.
The developer had hundreds of employees. So
Yeah.
so I think I just really streamlined exactly like knowing what my specialty was
Yeah.
from the years of working with them. So I think the first question to ask to find the perfect niche is assessing how much experience you have.
Yeah.
Okay? And what that really comes down to is it's just being really honest of what you know and what
Yeah.
you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're not going to go like, for your first sale in real estate, you've lived in a condo your whole life, I'm going to go sell mansions in Shaughnessy. You're not going to have much success doing that,
Well,
are
it's
you?
about flash or substance. Like, are you going to
Yeah.
be flashy and name yourself as being a luxury realtor
Yeah.
when you actually don't really understand what does luxury entail? Like,
Yes.
maybe it's a different type of tile that's coming from Italy
Yeah. And do you know
versus
anything about that?
versus China. Like,
Yeah.
right? Do you understand the construction differences in those materials?
Mhm.
Or, for example, maybe you understand like the lifestyle of somebody who kind of lives in a luxury property.
Yeah. Okay.
But then, someone who is a first time buyer who has like a typical like job, they don't, I'm not saying that luxury owners can't have typical jobs. What
Yeah.
I'm saying is maybe they just don't have the one transaction one day at a time type of person.
Yes. Yeah. 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 I see what you mean. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that makes sense, right? Yeah. Like, go with what you know, because you're going to probably have a much more likely chance of having that early success, right?
Mhm.
As opposed to just seeing a lot of clients that spend one day with you and say, this person doesn't know what they're talking about, right?
Exactly.
Find the people that are at the same stage of life as you and focus on those. That makes a lot of sense to
Yeah.
me.
And just take like little steps at a time. So if you've purchased a condo for yourself,
Yeah.
then you obviously know how to read strata documents. You understand what to look for when you're buying into a building that's 10 years old, for
Yeah.
example. The other thing is really self-assessing what your strengths are.
Yeah. Okay.
So as
How do you do that?
Well, there are so many different tests out there, but I would say if you're really good at negotiations, if you're really good at personal interactions and working with families because you have a family yourself. So
Mhm.
maybe your strength is really understanding the lifestyle of a couple with two kids versus someone who is a snowbird, like a person who 6 months down the year, like
Yeah.
in the year lives here versus 6 months in the States. And
Yeah, I would not be good working with them. I just don't know their lifestyle, right? I've never done that.
And not to say you can't go there. It's just if you're just getting into the market, into real estate, trying to understand and relate to people that you already know. And that's kind of where your comfort zone is.
Yeah, because I do know realtors who are like our age who are specifically focused on that, on downsizers and snowbirds and stuff. And you can do that. You just have to take the time to learn what their priorities are and learn what makes them tick, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
As opposed to just already knowing that because you are that person, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, me working with a family with, like you said, with two kids, like that would be very easy for me because that's what I know, that's what I do, right?
Yeah. And what I'm mentioning actually is these two realtors who do cross-border programs.
Oh,
So
okay.
buying in Tulum or Mexico or Arizona, they've really niched in that area. I don't think there's any other agents that are in Vancouver that are niching in that.
I mean, that comes down to why, like, so I guess the first question I would have had would have been why would you niche in like the snowbirds? But there's a great business opportunity there. If that's an underserved market, like those people, those snowbirds they would probably very much appreciate a realtor that knows exactly what they're doing, has those connections south of the border, as opposed to somebody who's like, well, I mostly sell in East Vancouver, but like let me see what I can do for you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, let's take me as an example. So I do not like Mexico. Okay. Like
Yeah.
I'm a person who
More of a Costa Rica gal, hey?
I'm more of a Costa Rica girl. Pura vida.
There you go.
But it's only for the reason like I've been to Mexico a few times and each time I've gotten sick and I've had bad experiences. Okay. So for me, I would not see myself specializing in that. And I wouldn't even direct people to buy there.
Right.
But so that's why I would not niche in that particular like
That makes total
area.
sense. Yeah.
So I love project marketing. And so what I've done was those are the type of properties that have lit me up is the creative side, the branding side.
Yeah.
And just also understanding why the developer chose that property, why the developer going through different logos and naming the project. That's what excites me.
Yeah. It's almost like creating it's like this baby that you get to like kind of mold and shape and see from the first conception all the way through the final sales, right? That could be a really fun thing, right?
Yeah. And I think, especially with yourself, like you mentioned earlier that there's about 15 different real estate podcasters
Yeah.
in Vancouver alone. So
Yeah.
I can't even imagine how many are out there
Mhm.
altogether. But what have you seen in the 15? Like how have we differentiated ourselves differently from all the ones that you've managed and the ones that you've listened to?
Well, I mean, you're not trying to take like first of all, like avoiding the hard sell is a nice thing, right? Like you're not out there saying like, hey, like the this podcast is specifically to promote our business. Like you're more like putting it out there as like a public service, right? This is stuff that's interesting to us and we think it'll be valuable to you as a listener, which I think is that's more something that people want to listen to as opposed to the standard, here's what's going into the market. Anyways, hire us to sell your real estate. Like that's what a lot of the real estate podcasts are. And there's just so many of them out there that I don't think there's like people can get that information anywhere, right? And so I don't think there's as much value to that sort of a proposition. So that's what I think you guys bring to it is just like things that are interesting and valuable to listeners. That's what In the House is giving, right? And if you want to choose to work with Jenny and Tony, that's great as well.
Thanks for the plug.
They're amazing realtors, both of them. But it's you're not out there saying like, if you listen to this podcast, like you have to work with us. No, it's more like here's this information that's valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's just one example specifically to podcasting. But if you wanted to become a realtor who's, for example, want to niche in locations.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so one could be, like I talked about, the cross-border buying in Mexico. So owning a property in Vancouver, owning a property in Mexico. You can specialize in waterfront properties. So I have a very good girlfriend who specializes in Anmore and Belcarra. And a lot of the properties there come with a boat slip or like
I didn't know that.
What do you call those things?
Like a
ramp.
Oh, a boat ramp.
Yeah, boat ramp.
Really? Okay.
So I don't know too much about it. I don't know what the legalities are of, how do you have to maintain it? Does the city maintain it? Or what are the rules in terms of how far it can go into the water? So that would be one specialty is what are the demands and prices of waterfront properties?
Yep.
How about golf course homes?
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
A little bit of risk there, but
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I would personally, I got really into golf this year. I would
Yeah.
love to live on a golf course. Like to just be able to walk out your front door and onto a golf course would be amazing.
Having a few beers at the
Yeah.
back while you're watching the sunset and
Yeah.
the back nine, spending some time with your friends.
Yeah. But if you hear the word "for," you take cover, right?
Yeah. Or put a net up in your backyard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, my wife wouldn't go for it.
So if you specialize in golf course homes, for example, there's tons in Kamloops. There's what properties are along golf courses here? Maybe
Well, yeah, I guess
there's the Fraser.
Yeah, because there's a couple golf courses down there. There's the because there's McCleary and the South Fan. I can't remember. Oh, Marine Drive.
Marine Drive. Yeah, there's houses.
There's and then if you go into East Fan, there's the Fraser View golf course. So there's probably I've never played that course, but there's probably a couple houses along there as well. So that could definitely be a niche. Like I think there'd be quite a few people in Vancouver, just like the people that are looking to only buy on waterfront. There's probably certain class of people that just want to own on a golf course, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And they're probably underserved.
They are. I wouldn't say and there's any specific agent in Vancouver at the moment that specifically says I specialize in golf course homes.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy. There's nobody doing that, right?
It's kind of true. You may have something going on over here. You guys can take that if you want. There's also islands.
Oh yeah, right.
I've never sold an island before.
It's cool.
Right?
That would be a fun niche.
But I think I see it a lot. Like there's quite a bit of specific like brokerages that I often find them. They're always advertising like resorts for sale or private islands for sale. So what does that entail? Maybe you need to know what the services are. Like, is it well water? Is there sanitary sewers lines going into there?
Yeah, I guess you'd have to know. If you're in the, let's say you're in the Strait, like the Georgia Strait, you'd have to know who's the permitting municipality of any particular island. And so you'd probably have a map of them and which municipality permits them. You'd have to know what what the rules are for adding the adding docks or adding there's a lot of stuff that you'd have to know there, which if you specialized in that and you could be the kind of one-stop shop for knowing that info, there's probably some business there. I would imagine that your sales would come few and far between because those are pretty expensive to buy an island, but that could be a great business opportunity too. Yeah.
Farming.
Oh, farming. Yeah, this is a can of worms. I live in Pemberton now, so this is
okay. Yeah. So
my wife and I were just look. Oh yeah, there's so the whole up the valley, every single property is ALR, right? So if I don't know a whole lot about this, but we were just looking at a property that's, it was last year it was listed for 2.5 and then it came down to 2.3 and then 2.2. They recently fired their realtor, got a new realtor, listed for 1.65 for 10 acres and a beautiful, a nicely updated house on the property with a barn and a guest house for 1.65, I think.
So are you farming soon?
No, that's the thing though, because we looked at it and it's a little bit isolated, so I probably wouldn't consider it. But even if we did, you have to do some sort of farming there. You have to either farm on it or you have to lease it to a farmer. Some sort of farming has to happen or some sort of.
Okay. So there's prohibition, you can live on there, but you also have to have a commercial business going there.
That farmland has to be being used for something to do with agriculture, whether it's raising livestock or whether it, you could literally lease it out to some farmer who puts 3 cows on it and you'd be good to go. But you just have to know, you'd have to know all the rules behind that. You'd have to know if you were planning to build, let's say you had this house there and you wanted to build a guest house there, you'd have to know if you're actually allowed to do that. Because even though it's 10 hectares, you're only allowed to build a certain amount of square footage of livable property on there, right? So if I was going to buy a property like that, I would definitely want to hire a buying realtor who knows about buying farmland.
Right. So you're also buying the business too, or it's only the property?
No, you're just buying the property, but there's huge limitations to what you can do on it. But huge tax breaks as well. Your property taxes on that is going to be next to nothing because of the ALR. So yeah, I don't know. It's yeah, you definitely would want to find a realtor who niched in that.
Well, and then to take it back a step, maybe even considering buying like a homestead. So there's
Mhm.
like tons of houses there that where you're really off the grid and you are leaving maybe less of a like imprint on earth, but you're growing
Yeah.
everything yourself. You're very independent and you're kind of disconnected with the connected urban world and the
Yeah.
market.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's also properties like that where it's maybe like a half acre or an acre, but like you could literally just grow every single thing that you eat for the summer. Anyways, you have to figure out something for the winter, but like
Yeah.
yeah, there's opportunities like that as well.
So that's location kind of type of property based.
Mhm.
Another type of niche is occupational niches.
Oh, okay.
And if I was to like maybe scan my head right now, my brain right now to think about some of the things that earlier days, 20 years ago when I started in the business, I noticed that there were agents who were specializing in churches. They were specializing in like dog kennels and like businesses, for example.
Okay.
Or there's one that really specialized in like entering the tech world.
Yeah.
So he had, I guess, a tech background before he became a realtor. So
Okay.
his circle of friends, his sphere of influence, was all were all techies, and techie like it was big back then. That's when EA came into Vancouver.
Okay.
There were, I think, even just like in real estate alone, um, websites like realtors needed websites.
Yep.
Realtors started social media. Like, so there was a niche that he had. I can't even really pinpoint because I didn't really study him too much, but he just had so many clients that were in the tech business. There were either programmers or there were software developers.
So you need to know where the hubs are of tech. So you'd be selling around like Yaletown, Gastown, Great
Exactly.
Northern Way now. Yeah, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And so I don't. It doesn't seem like he's too much into the business now. Maybe has invested his money
In
in
the tech
tech,
industry?
right? Smart guy,
Yeah.
not running around like us. There's also a possibility of even niching in like properties that had grow ups too.
Oh, right. Yeah, because those used to be untouchable, right?
Oh,
And are they still? Is it
well,
what's your experience
I
there?
guess when you say untouchable, you have to disclose, no matter how many times it's changed hands, that it's been and has been a grow up before. Even though you're
Yes.
allowed now like 3 or 4 plants
Yeah.
in the home
Okay.
legally, before you couldn't. You even
Yeah.
had one plant.
Well, I remember like when I first got into real estate, 2013, like you look at a property that should sell for mhm, well, at that time, like a property that should sell for 1.5 million, which is a lot for a house,
Yeah.
would be selling for like 800,000 because and it has that clause in there, like was a grow up, and everybody would in the realtor remarks, and every single realtor would be like, nope, nope, nope,
No,
nope,
don't touch.
nope.
Yeah.
I guess because of like the potential for moisture damage and like the stigma of like a criminal property and like a whole host of reasons. But is that still? Do you know if that's still like a huge red flag on a property, or is it less
Mhm.
so?
I would say like I've sold a handful of grow up properties that have had grow ups and whether it was like just the recent one or it was
Years and
like
years
years
ago.
ago, the prices have not because what happens is they have to have a full like inspection report and certification by the city stating that it's livable. Okay. So
Wow.
there's no mold. It's been tested. There's been there's like actual reports saying that it's safe to move in because the moisture level is back to normal.
Hmm.
The electrical is wired correctly. So the stigma part of it, that it be a incriminating like property, is more so just a personal value system.
Right.
Okay. So
Okay.
there's nothing actually in the appraisal that actually states that is actually worth less money. And then the second part of it is because we have to disclose that it used to be a grow up, does it actually have less value? And
Yeah.
I would say no to that. From my experience, every property has sold at market value in comparison to some of their adjacent properties.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so it has kind of changed in that way where I think people have, especially since it was a hot seller's market. So you would just try to pick up any property.
Yeah,
So
right.
I think it maybe like died along with that.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, because I remember them just being like, no, you didn't even present them to your clients unless they were like specifically asking for that type of property because they wanted something for way less money like than it was worth. So yeah, that's interesting to hear that's gone down. But that could be another niche because there's obviously a lot of stuff to know there, right?
Absolutely. Like there's the new radon as well. I was just reading an article about radon, how it actually is the second reason why people are dying in Vancouver because of lung cancer. Not Vancouver, sorry, BC.
From radon?
From radon.
So what's the deal with the radon? Because I've heard a little bit about this.
Okay, so radon is actually an invisible gas that comes from the ground.
Yeah.
And it seeps in from unrepaired cracks in the walls, foundations that are like kind of split open.
Okay.
So it actually is slowly leaking. It's actually worse, like 10 times worse than asbestos. Yes.
Because asbestos isn't doing anything unless you disturb it.
Right. If you don't disturb it, you're okay.
Yeah.
But with the radon gas, it really is just coming up from the soils, right? From the soil and from earth. And a lot of the houses here, I know of 2 agents that have had lung cancer. They've never smoked in their life.
Yeah.
And they're healthy. But it's because of the radon that got them lung cancer.
Did they and they went back and tested their property and found that it was like it was radon, like a high concentration?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's why now our property disclosure statements are requiring the question, has it been tested for radon? So I was actually thinking that I should niche in that.
Yeah.
That I should provide a free kit, which is actually very cost effective, a free kit to my clients. You guys can steal this idea. And the most accurate testing is sending it off to a lab. And it takes about 90 days to actually test whether it's a high radon property.
Okay.
A high rating of a radon property. But if there are shorter test results where you can get it a lot sooner.
Like home kits?
Yeah, home kits.
Okay.
But it's actually not as accurate. So the problem is that obviously when you have a subject condition, normally the subject removal is 7 days, 5 days, right?
Yeah.
But most radon tests to get some accurate results is actually 90 days. So I would say, like, if I was to maybe niche in this particular avenue, maybe picking up a whole like pallet load of radon kits, home kits, maybe even providing it to the homeowners on a specific like street and gifting it as a free thing, the home test for
smart,
right?
Yeah.
I just thought of that.
About selling your property? How about we just
test it?
Yeah.
And I feel like I just thought about that this morning, actually.
That's smart. That is smart. Yeah. And then when it comes back and says there's no radon, they say, well, maybe I would like to sell my property because I can put this on the PDF.
And Jenny is concerned about my health.
That's right. Yes. She's always thinking about me.
I'm always thinking. How about like somebody like a musician?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is a tough one. This is something that I was suggested when I got into real estate.
Right.
You should focus on musicians.
No? It's not a good idea?
If your business is to sell real estate, you need to have a business where you're selling real estate to people that have money to buy real estate. And musicians, not typically the type of cohort that has, it's just not a very well-paying job. It's a job people do because they have a passion for it, but not typically because it makes them a living wage.
So don't work with musicians.
And not necessarily. I think it'd be a tough niche because your buyer pool would just be so small. Like the amount of successful musicians, like even like VSO musicians don't get paid. Like they get paid a living wage, but not like great. Like not. That's a tough one. Yeah.
Okay, Podfather. What I'm trying to say and allude to is that something like this your property here, which has insulated walls,
Yeah.
a recording room, I would think that it would actually be really great for a musician to move in.
Yeah. Okay. I see what you mean. Yeah. So like somebody maybe, yeah, just the average person who like has, a standard job that pays them a living wage, but does music on the side
Mhm.
would love to buy this home,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
So yeah, that's speaking of which, if you're looking to buy a home.
I was gonna plug your house, Brayden, but I wasn't sure if it was off the market already.
No, it's on the market.
It's on the
Yeah,
market.
yeah.
Okay. So it's for sale. We're not gonna say the address just for security reasons.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
if you guys are interested in buying a property in East Vancouver, talk to Brayden or his realtors,
As
which are
recording
not
studio.
me, by the way.
Sorry.
Okay. Another type of niche you can actually go towards is the home types. So, what I mean by that is, are you going to specialize in ranchers or bungalows?
Mhm.
Are you going to specialize in laneway homes? Are you going to specialize in condo conversions or
Yeah.
home renovations? Right. So, you can really tap into so many different types of properties now. And especially since the summer, a lot of our municipalities in British Columbia have gone into multiplex options.
Mhm. Yep. Oh, also, another thing that's happened and I'm sure there's been realtors that have taken advantage of this, the Airbnb ban.
Oh, yes.
If you were to pop up in April and put out a bunch of Facebook ads saying, I specialize in selling one bedroom and studio condos, you probably would have gotten some business. You could probably build a business out of that because
Yeah.
people were just trying to unload them left, right, and center. So staying on top of what's happening in the regulatory industry and like the province and the legislature could potentially net some possible niches and business ideas, right?
Good one. Yeah. Yeah. Another one is lofts.
Yes.
I just sold one loft. So I actually had two listings, one loft in East Forth,
Okay,
in
yeah.
East Vancouver, Mount Pleasant here. So I sold it last year. And then I put the next door neighbor one on the market this year.
Oh,
Didn't
okay.
get as much money. I mean, it was obviously market driven, but the
Yeah.
home was the same square footage. I just kind of find like it's a hit and miss with lofts.
Really, depending on like the market sentiment and whether lofts are cool in that particular time period, or do you find that that comes and goes?
It's definitely a niche. I could just tell like it needs to hit a certain type of buyer.
Right.
And obviously there is a group out in Vancouver here called Van City Lofts. They have that URL.
Yep.
So they like obviously feature a lot of lofts on their website. But you can do so many cool things with lofts and but I definitely feel like if you have a family, like sometimes it's not particularly the right type of product for them. I just found
Yeah.
like the
Oh,
whole
for
building had no
sure.
kids.
Oh man, yeah. I lived in a loft that was maybe even in the same building you sold an art. What is it called?
Artworks.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you lived in that building?
I lived in that building,
Okay.
and that's how I realized a loft is not for me. My wife and I we didn't even have kids, but we had very different schedules. And literally just spent our entire lives tiptoeing around because one of us was sleeping she was working night shifts as a nurse and sleeping during the day. And like, we would just be tiptoeing around the whole time. So if you're very aligned and you have the same schedule, it could be or if you're a single person, it could be a really fun thing. But you're right. That's a niche market.
Yeah. Did you live on the fourth floor?
No, second floor.
Second floor, there were okay, because both of my listings were on the fourth floor, but they had like 16-foot ceilings. And one of my first seller like had lots of artwork. It was pretty cool to actually sell that one. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was really
Well,
fun.
maybe it was just how it showed or like the cool.
Could have been, yeah, yeah. But
the vibe.
I just felt like even during the open houses, it really drew in like a certain type of target. So yeah. Another type, mobile homes and float homes.
Oh wow. There's another can
Right?
of worms.
That's like you have to know about like rental, like obviously you don't own the dock. So you're gonna have to pay like fees for that. I've sold a mobile home before.
Okay. Yeah.
And the rental pad is very expensive. So it's like
Really?
$800-900 a month, $1,000 a month, but you don't pay property taxes. You don't. So it's more just like you're leasing the space.
Yeah. Okay. It kind of like it's give, half a dozen of one, six of the other. You're kind of like giving that property tax. You don't have the property tax kind of bill, but you have the pad rental. Same thing with like a boat, like a slip rental, right?
Yeah,
You have to
exactly.
pay to moor your boat if you have a houseboat. I would also be wondering about, because I was actually looking at one of these the other day because they're so
Yeah.
cheap, right? There's this
Yeah.
one that's popped up. It's like a BC Ferries home or a BC Ferries ship that's been converted into like a log cabin almost.
Wow. That must be pretty big then.
It's one of the smaller ferries, but like it's still, it's huge. And it's fairly cheap. Like I think it's like $500,000, but like you gotta wonder, like every time I look at this, I'm like, what would that like? What's the maintenance? Like,
Yeah.
if you were a realtor, and you were specializing in those, and you were selling them, you'd have to be able to inform the clients on like, what do you have to do to keep that thing afloat? Like, what do you do if
There's
something,
a storm?
yeah, what sorts of things go wrong on that? How do you tie it up when there's a storm? Like, what do you do if it gets loose? Like, who do you call for to tug it back to shore? Like, these are all questions I'd have as a buyer. And if you knew the answers to them, you could totally niche in that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's, I remember somebody at, one of my friends had like a housewarming or like a bridal shower at her mom's houseboat. It was so cool though. Like it just felt like a real home. I can see myself living in a float home, actually.
Me too.
Yeah,
I
I
think so.
feel like it'll be maybe, I don't know if it'll be just like a novelty at the beginning and then you kind of get tired of it.
Yeah, you realize that actually I get sick on this thing all the time.
Yeah. But don't like, I also feel like going back to movies too, you know how like cops they always live on float boats, like they always live on boats, but then they're always like getting chased or like somebody's like trying to break into their houseboat.
What?
Like
What
float
cops
boats?
live on float homes in movies?
I don't know. I'm thinking of one with Sandra Bullock, and like I don't know.
I think this is a very, very. Speaking of niches, this is a very niche genre of movie here. I think
No,
when I
I
think of
feel
cops,
like they always live on boats for some reason.
I think when I think of cops in movies, I think of like they always have some ridiculous home that's like way more than a cop salary could ever afford. Like there's this, I can't remember I think it's called Bosch. It's like he's got this ridiculous home on stilts looking over like the hall, like all of LA. Like he's up in Mulholland Drive or something. And I'm like, come on, there is a backstory behind
Well,
it.
that's the bad cop.
Yeah,
That's the bad cop that gets all the money.
Yeah, okay,
I don't know
there
what
you
you're
go.
watching there. Because
like
in my
bad
mind,
cop
I was
shows.
thinking that they live in really bad homes that are not well taken care of.
Like float homes
Yeah.
that are sinking.
Okay. Okay. We obviously have very different taste in shows.
I think so. Yeah, I'm watching bad cop shows. You're watching good cop shows. But
They can also niche in demographics.
okay, so
Seniors.
age. Okay, yeah.
Or maybe cultural background. Like, for example, I don't speak Spanish, but maybe another realtor speaks Spanish and they're going to work with clients that speak Spanish as well.
Yes. When I first got into real estate, my mom's business partner in her developments, he was like, "You want to make a lot of money in real estate?" I was like, "I do." He's like, "Learn how to speak Mandarin." And I was like, that's a pretty tall order. Like I barely know how to speak French. You're probably not going to do that. But he's right. You absolutely
I feel like you would hit a very like businessmen.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like who want to have like good connections because you're Caucasian and you're also, is that right to say Caucasian? Sorry.
Yeah, I think so.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you also speak Mandarin. You can do business both because I
think it would be a huge opportunity.
Yeah, a lot of clients would even though they're Caucasian, they would hire an Asian person because they have the connections to the Asian market.
Yeah, and likewise, I have heard of like specifically Chinese immigrants that would come here, business people, and they don't want to hire a Chinese agent because you're right, they want somebody who can like have those connections and talk to all the other agents in town, right? And so, or you could niche into like first time home buyers or like younger people,
single parents who are divorcing.
Yeah,
those are all typical niches that would probably be a little bit more obvious because, maybe you're going through that in your own life and then you kind of connect that way with somebody.
Do you think, is that So have you ever heard about any realtors who, I know there are realtors who niche in like basically divorce sales, right?
Mhm.
Are they like, do you know any of them that are doing that? And second question would be, are they like going to the court records to find their potential clients, like almost like ambulance chasers?
Oh, you know what? That's a good point. I'm going to give that idea to somebody. But I have an agent at my office who's niching in, like starting to niche into
Yeah.
divorcees. So she's actually hosting a presentation at my brokerage one of the evenings this month.
Yeah.
She's actually hired a financial planner and a divorce lawyer.
That's who you need to make friends
Right?
with, right? The divorce
Divorce
lawyers.
lawyers. So
Yeah.
maybe that in a way, that's kind of chasing the business is like you're
Yeah.
connecting yourself with the right people who, they're already consulting with a divorce lawyer, and then they know that there's going to be some property assets that need to be split.
And then the financial planner is just the icing on the cake. Like
Right.
that's
Like
the other
wrapping
half
up,
of
where
it.
are you going to put the rest of your money? Right.
Smart. Very
Yeah, she's smart.
Yeah.
That's because was coached by me.
Of course.
And then also, I would say working moms, single moms, or like newlyweds, those are niches. Religious groups, like if you go to church,
Oh yeah. Yeah. Big
right?
time.
That would
Yeah.
make
That's
easy
huge way to
sense.
build trust, right? Like
Absolutely.
if you were think about it like a minority religion, like if you're a Muslim and you niche in helping other Muslims buy homes in Vancouver, like that's a pretty like that's a huge trust factor right there already. So yeah.
I did work with a relocation specialist, actually.
Oh, okay.
So she was like a HR headhunter, and she had one like kind of client, I guess you could say, who was moving from Ontario to be a professor at SFU. So I helped this one couple, and then this one couple actually referred me like 4 other people that were moving from Ontario to become professors at SFU. So I have like 4 or 5 clients actually that are professors.
That's wow.
And
Okay.
they actually, as soon as they arrived, they bought. So it was in their mind, they didn't want to rent.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Because they already had steady jobs, their jobs were secured. They also came with family. So they wanted like a home that was a home rather than having to move and deal with landlords.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a good client to have. Like if you're targeting people that are relocating, they're going to come here, they're going to maybe have 2 or 3 trips in Vancouver to like look, weekend trips, look at homes, and they're almost guaranteed going to buy something because they need something because they have to move here. Their job has already got them coming, right?
Totally,
So
yeah.
that's a good niche too.
Yeah. So how, like we've named off the top just from this episode, like maybe 20 different niches.
Yeah.
How does one actually get started and master? What I recommend is just really studying and immersing yourself into like something very specific that you really enjoy.
Yeah.
Whether pulling from your strengths, pulling from your own experiences, and then just like really networking and honing in on that particular skill before you try to dive into like 10 other ones.
Yeah, find the service, find what you like and what you can be potentially good at and the kind of like Venn diagram cross section of those, hit that, and then make those connections with the service professionals in that industry that are going to be able to feed you business, because that's where you're going to get all your business from to start out with, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And then once you help 1 or 2, you get some testimonials, you shape your brand, you build your website based on those popular hashtag words, saying that, messaging the fact that you're an expert, that you understand the ins and outs of a particular type of property, or the ins and outs of divorcees who are going through that process. And then even with like specifically, like for example, working with divorcees, you have to have that that compassion for what they're going through.
Yes. Yeah. That's a huge one, right? And maybe that's a little bit difficult to do unless you've had a divorce yourself, but like maybe not. I don't know. I would find it. I remember when I first started in real estate, I hadn't bought a home yet. And then I bought a home shortly after that. And going through the process made it so much easier to understand what people were going through, buyers, especially first-time home buyers. So if you've had a divorce, that might be a very easy way to like niche into the divorce market, like because you understand what they're going through, right?
Yeah.
So your life experience might kind of dictate your niche, right?
Yeah. And I would say that it's when you're selecting a real estate niche, it's not permanent. You can always pivot. And perhaps once you find out from a few transactions that the messaging needs to be switched, or perhaps maybe some of the positioning, it works, but maybe in a different type of location or market, that's also easy to switch up. So give it a try. I wouldn't worry too much about trying to see the traction like right away, because obviously it takes time to build and fill that gap in that industry, in our industry.
Mhm.
And I would say, how long does it take? I would probably, I don't know. I feel like it's really hard to kind of put a finger on how long it would take to see the traction.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough. I would think let's put it this way. I would think that it would take less time to get traction in a niche than it would just generalizing and trying to like serve everybody and therefore serving nobody. So
Good point.
I think your traction is going to come faster. So can't really put a time limit, a time period on it, but I think you'd have because I see it with in the parallel the world in podcasting when people niche down, it helps them get to the point where they want to be faster. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. And obviously, the only risk really is that if you don't do it, you're competing against other agents that are just also spinning their wheel. So, what I really recommend is just getting started and
Mhm.
finding something that you're really tempted to say, yes, just give it a try, what excites you. And I would also say, just go for it. Like, just go for it. That's all I can say
Yeah.
is just go
Put
for it.
yourself
There's
out
not
there.
much more that I can offer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also put it out there what you're offering to people, because then they may know somebody who can also help and support your business.
Yeah, and I would also say don't be scared to if you like to niche down too hard. Like I know you're pushing, if you're going to focus on specifically uh divorced or recently divorced couples in this particular area of Mount Pleasant, like you might think that that's niching down too hard, but like those people that are in that category, they're not going to even consider using anybody else. They're going to be like your like champions, and like they're going to be your perfect clients, and they won't even consider another realtor. So it's kind of hard to niche down too narrowly,
Yeah.
because you're going to be serving that group just that much more, right? So
Amazing. Yeah. Well, think out of the box, guys. I really enjoyed this episode with you,
yeah, it's
Brayden.
been fun. Hey.
Just thinking like on the top of our minds, like, what can you niche in? It actually gave me some ideas. So I want to get started on mine with the rate on
Yes,
gas.
you should. Yeah, I think you should.
Thanks for tuning in, guys.